Tonight on this channel, I do another tier list. The video goes on for far too long, and everyone gets bored and wants to hurt me. Yes, everyone, it is your boy Pred once again with yet another tier list to close out the year for us. Because fuck you, that's why. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No. As you could probably guess, I haven't posted in quite a bit, as is per my tradition. So, and 2023 is closing out, which 2023 has had its ups and its downs. I think for everyone, certainly for me, it had its ups and its downs. But hey, that's just kind of every year, I think. But decided to close out the year with yet another tier list. And also, this video is going to serve, after I'm done with this, as an introduction as to what you can look forward to me in 2024. So if you want to stick around, go near the end of the video, I'll try and post the exact timestamp to when you can figure out the future of the channel and all that good shit. Whatever. But enough of me stalling. Let us talk about the final tier list for this year, and that is the Top Gear Grand Tour Road Trip Cars. As you guys could probably imagine, I am a huge fan of both Top Gear and the Grand Tour. Both of Top Gear came out at the perfect time for me. Well, not the perfect time, but I discovered Top Gear at the perfect time when this was after I had bought Forza 4 for like $5 and all the DLC accompanying it, and just turned into a massive fucking car enthusiast, as you guys could probably extrapolate from some of my videos that I've done. And when I found Top Gear on Hulu, that just hooked. As soon as I found old school like old Top Gear, I was like hooked. And I guess old meaning the Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, James May early bits of Top Gear, not the original from like the 70s through the early 2000s. Not that that's bad, it's just different. So that was the perfect time, and I've loved Top Gear ever since. I've watched damn near every single episode of both it and the Grand Tour a couple times. I can quote them all by heart. Again, all of them by heart. And that I always love them. Love these three old British idiots, as a lot of people probably do. I get why people don't like them, but Top Gear is always going to be a part of who I am as both a car enthusiast and just as a person. So, as you can imagine, they did a lot of specials. And these are all the cars that, well, not all the cars. This was made before a Scandi Flick and, oh God, what was the other one? The newest one that they did. Fuck. Forget the title of that. But everything up before those two is accounted for. These are basically going to be all the Top Gear special road trip across whatever you want to call it cars that that the boys have driven. So we're just going to go through and rank them all. Couple ground rules here. I'm going to be looking at two distinct factors. One, how much I know and like them as actual vehicles, and two, how well they fit in with the particular episode, how memorable they are, how you know how well it fits the challenge. Did they make the right decision? So it's going to be my own personal views on these cars. Well, everything's going to be personal, but it's taking into account what I think of these cars as cars and what I think of them in the context of the special that is presented. And that's about it. And again, just like everything else, my opinion, feel free to disagree with me. That's cool. But hey, don't get butthurt if I put stuff that you like in a category that you wouldn't put it in. With that said, let's get down to it, and let's actually do this by special, and I'll take the three cars from said special and put them kind of into their respective categories. So let's start with kind of the first of these road trips, which was them going to the United States the first time, buying used cars for less than $1,000, and driving across this great state of this nation of ours. I like it. The bit in Alabama always makes me cringe. I always skip over that part just because, yikes. Um, Rest assured, anyone, not all of America is like that. Hell, not even all the South is like that. Um, so that's like the deep South. That is the South so deep that you even step a toe in it, and you're gonna come out of it with a Confederate flag on your head, a desire to fuck your cousin, and a hankering for some cornbread and NASCAR. It's deep. But that aside, still enjoy that special. So let's start with all the cars from that, and let's start with Jeremy's car, his 1991 Camaro RS with a 5-speed manual and the 305 V8. Yeah, I'm not really a big fan of the third gen Camaro. I'm actually not that big of a Camaro fan in general, in all honesty. For one, I always prefer the Pontiac Firebirds to the Camaros, just because the Firebirds have always looked better to me. Even though I know that from like 82 on, there's no true mechanical difference between them. The Pontiacs always look better to me. The Pontiac Firebird has been in, Smokey and the Bandit. It was Kit. There's a coolness to the Firebird. The Camaro's always kind of had this white trash, trailer park, mullet sporting kind of image to it. Every generation of Camaro, yes, even the new ones. And I know if you're 12 years old and you like Bumblebee from the Transformers movies, that you are probably going to disagree with me vehemently on this. If you don't know what that big word is, look it up sometime. But I've just never been a Camaro fan. And Jeremy's Camaro is not necessarily the best generation of Camaro of that generation either. The IROC Z with the 350 small block, and that's fuel injected, that makes, good solid 200 horsepower is much better, even though GM couldn't develop a manual strong enough for it, so it's stuck with a 4-speed slush box. I know there are manual swaps out there, but still, with the only if your true performance variant is fed via 4-speed slush-o-matic, there's an issue. There's an issue. But then again, the Firebird has the same problem. But then again, the Firebird, you could also get the the turbocharged Buick V6 that was used in the Grand National. Only in '89 though for the 20th anniversary, but still, it's there. And Jeremy's Camaro isn't exactly the best. I mean, the color's cool for it. Wasn't exactly the best car. I mean, it's fast compared to the other two, but not by much. And other than him driving around with a cow on his roof, it's really not all that memorable. It's just kind of a mediocre car that didn't really stand out apart from a couple scenes, so I'm probably going to put it in C tier. Next up is Hammond's 73 Dodge Ram pickup truck. Don't know what engine it's gotten in. All I know is that Hammond said it made like 190 horsepower. I want to say it's the 5.9 liter V8 motor. Either the 5.9 slash 360 cubic inch or the 318 slash 5.2 liter V8. I can't imagine it's the straight six at all. The straight six was only making like 105 horsepower in 73, even in the Dodge Ram trucks. Welcome to Gas Crisis America. Yeah, everyone likes to make fun of American cars for their low horsepower during that era. I get it. And really, it's just kind of your standard pickup truck. I was never the biggest fan of the Dodge Rams. Really, I mean, I've driven newer Dodge Rams, which on the one hand, they are nice driving trucks. On the other hand, it's Chrysler build quality, which is to say it's very hit and miss. Um, the older ones don't appeal to me as much as, say, the Ford F-Series or the Chevy CKs of that generation. They're just kind of, they just exist. And Hammond's truck with the white paint job and the massive dents, he did have a 4-speed in it. And there were some pretty funny moments, like the fact that his brakes didn't work for shit on that thing. And I guess there is something kind of nice and humble about a standard low grade pickup truck in its glory, but not my favorite car of the special either, so I'd probably put it alongside Jeremy's in all honesty. And then the last one is James May's 89 Cadillac Brougham. I've actually driven a Cadillac Brougham before of this exact generation. That exact model year, actually. It's got its issues with it, of course. That 307 cubic inch or 5-liter carbureted Oldsmobile V8 is not powerful at all. 140 horsepower and like 250 pound-feet of torque. It's not a speed demon by any means. It is slow. You can get it up to speed, but it's not gonna like it at all. About the size of a B-52, handles about as well as one, and the interior is not exactly high class and high quality. There's a lot of um kind of above average plastic and plastiwood everywhere and some spray painted chrome bits. But man, if you've never driven a vintage Cadillac before, there's just something about it. Ride is smooth, it's quiet, it's supremely comfortable, especially with those seats in it. A lot of space in there, and it's just a relaxing car to drive. And James's car actually still looked rather good, despite the fact that the plastic fillers that connect the taillights and the headlights are kind of had disintegrated, which yeah, is pretty standard fare of this era. I mean, if you manage to find one of these for sale that's not by like a dealership that still has those plastic fillers in it, especially the rear, consider yourself lucky because the sun just destroys them. Especially in a climate like Florida, I can attest to that. Having lived in California, you don't see a whole lot of them without those plastic filler bumpers. Why GM decided not to make those metal, I have no idea, but GM's gonna GM because GM is GM. Um, but it's still a really nice, really good car. James did make the proper choice, I feel, for a road trip. If I were traveling across the United States, I would definitely want something with a nice soft ride to it, and very few cars are softer than a big vintage full-size body-on-frame Cadillac, in my opinion. Um, Fantastically slow. I can attest to what he says, and yeah, he really should have fixed the damn battery in that stupid thing. But I still kind of enjoy it, so I'd put it in B tier. I don't think objectively as a car, it's not the best that's ever happened, but hey, it's probably the best car that is part of that special. And yeah, that episode actually did really make me like those old Cadillac Bromes quite a bit. So thank you, James May, for turning me into a land yacht aficionado. I very much appreciate it. Awesome. Next up is Botswana, I want to say. Yeah, Botswana. So let's start with James's choice, the Mercedes. I want to say it was a 280E. Maybe it's a W1 123 Mercedes Benz. Technically not E class, but E class ish. You guys all know the W123 Mercedes. Long lasted, dependable, reliable. You look at it, you just know it's a Mercedes Benz back when Mercedes met Mercedes. Not exactly the fastest thing on four wheels, especially if you get a naturally aspirated diesel version. 0 to 60 in 32 seconds. And people were willing to buy basic ass, slow ass diesel variants of these back in the 70s that cost that the base models alone cost more than dieselly loaded Cadillacs and Lincolns just because it said Mercedes Benz on it. Um, which I never understood. I mean, granted, it's probably going to be a hell of a lot better built than those Cadillacs and Lincolns from the 70s, but value for money proposition, I certainly wouldn't want to be trading even a smog choked big block V8 and all the amenities I can get for a diesel powered four-door sedan that doesn't ride nearly as well. It doesn't have nearly the amenities with it. But I still respect the Benz for what it is, and James did make a very good choice. I mean, those generation of Mercedes are going to last forever in a day, and you can fix them with just basic power tools. They're pretty heavy though. As James found out when he was going through the salt mines, and by the end there were so many body panels missing off of it. Which, yeah, I mean, it's built like a tank, but it weighs about the same as one as well. But it's a Mercedes. It's the safe, practical, boring choice, especially in Africa where you can find a Mercedes on damn near every street corner. But it's also not really the most interesting car that they've had, so I'd probably say it's solid B tier territory in my opinion. Next up is Jeremy's Lancia Beta Coupe. Um, don't mind the Lancia Beta at all. I like Lancias, but mostly just the rally stuff like the Stratos and the 037, the Delta S4, the Delta Integrale. I do kind of dig the Gamma and the Monte Carlo just a little bit, and I do have some fondness for the Thema 832, but other than that, Lancia's just kind of been like, take it or leave it in my eyes. The Beta's not one of their better cars. I mean, it rusted to shit everywhere, and the example Jeremy bought was really not that good. The fact he managed to get that thing across the finish line in the first place is honestly a miracle. It's stylish, don't get me wrong, but yeah, not exactly one of the better cars for it. But I'm still gonna put it in C tier just because it's a Lancia. And then of course, Oliver, good old fashioned Oliver. Richard Hammond's 1963 Opel Kadett. Tiny little, I forget what displacement he had. I want to say it was like a 1.1 liter inline four or something. Made like 40 horsepower, at least when it was brand new. But that little thing just kept on going and going. And honestly, you can't hate Oliver. You just can't. Oliver is an S class car. Or an S tier car, I should say. Um, there is no hatred for Oliver. Oliver is God. So, yeah, that's pretty simple. Botswana's not one of my favorite specials, but hey, I like it well enough. Next up is going to be Bolivia, where they had to buy cheap 4x4s and go across Bolivia with them. First up is going to be Jeremy's choice, which is the first generation Range Rover. With the 3.5, which he thought was a 3.9. Oh, poor Jeremy. I like these first generation Range Rovers quite a bit, but at the same time, I also recognize that they don't work at all. When they work, they're probably some of the most brilliant off-road cars to ever exist. But that's when they work, and it's a Range Rover, which means 90% of the time it's not going to. At least it's not going to work well. Jeremy kind of made a odd choice with it. I mean, I kind of get his logic. When a Range Rover works, it works, but he and everyone knows by now that you don't buy an older Range Rover and expect it to work. It's probably not as bad as the P38 second gens, but still, the Range Rover Classic is not something I would pick for this. But he actually did buy the most reliable car of the group, even despite the fact that he had to cut holes in the hood in order to prevent it from overheating. And then, of course, there was that famous thing with Death Road. Oh yeah. If you guys know what I'm talking about. If you've never seen that before, if you're genuinely afraid of heights, I will not recommend watching this. I mean that sincerely. Don't watch that particular thing if you're deathly afraid of heights, because it's just gonna give you an anxiety attack. But Jeremy surprisingly picked the best car of the group. In all honesty, I'm surprised by it. Even though, like I said, even though the Range Rover is a brilliant car when it works, it's still not something I personally would choose. But hey, it ended up being better than expected. So yeah, I'd probably put it in A tier. It was a solid car, even though I know it's not solid, but he found a good one. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. Contrast that with Richard Hammond and his FJ40 Toyota Land Cruiser. Not a big old school FJ40 fan. I just don't understand the appeal of them. Well, I understand the appeal of them from a reliability perspective, but I've driven plenty of um, Forerunners and trucks and plenty of new Forerunners and the newer Tacomas and Tundras. If I know anything about Toyota, I probably am not going to fit in an FJ40, and the ride is going to be absolutely unbearable. It'll work, it'll last, provided you live in a climate where it doesn't rain, because these things rust like mad. And I still will never understand the prices people pay for them, but I at least acknowledge that it is a reliable car. Unfortunately, Hammond bought the most unreliable version of the FJ40 ever. Wouldn't even start when he got on the boat. And somebody tried turning it into a convertible, which was just his little donkey. And then eventually it ended up rolling over in the Andes Mountains of Bolivia and just completely killing itself. But by that point, I feel like it was a mercy kill. I want to say like the drive shaft exploded and it ended up becoming two-wheel drive. Uh, it had basically no power to it, just so many issues with that little Land Cruiser. And me being not being the hugest Land Cruiser fan, I mean, just for entertainment value alone, I'm going to put it in C tier. But Hammond did not make a very good choice at all. Neither did James, in all honesty. With his little Suzuki, I want to say this is like the Samurai, the little Suzuki Samurai, I want to say, or SJ, whatever it's called. You guys know this by now. Tiny little four-wheel off-road Suzuki, famous in the 80s. Consumer Reports famously stated that it could tip over at any time, even though people were driving 4x4s like regular cars and didn't understand high center of gravity plus sharp turn is going to equal keep rolling, 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 rolling. Huge controversy. Pretty much killed Suzuki's momentum in the United States. I don't know what it is about James and him buying like these tiny little these really dinky little off-roaders. I kind of get his logic. You don't want to go too big when it comes to off-roading because the more metal you're going to have to maneuver around, the more likely it's going to get stuck. And in all likelihood, going bigger is not always necessarily better. But at the same time, these tiny little short wheelbase, crappy little off-roaders that he gets, I don't understand it. It's like trying to off-road in like a Geo Tracker or something. Just I personally don't understand, but I understand Suzuki a little bit more, but it wasn't really the most memorable car compared to the Range Rover that actually worked and the Toyota that didn't, and I'm not the biggest fan of these Suzuki off-roaders at all. And yeah, James pretty much said that it just completely shattered his back, which I don't doubt in the slightest. So it's probably going to be D tier for me. Just doesn't have a whole lot of redeeming features to it. It's not, I wouldn't say an awful car, just, you know, just kind of them's the breaks, I suppose. Okay, next up is going to be Vietnam, where they had to buy motorcycles for about £1,000 and ride across Vietnam. I know a lot of people really think that Vietnam was like the absolute best thing that they've ever done. I think it's good. I don't view it as the masterpiece that everyone says it is. I kind of have to be in the mood to watch Vietnam, which is, good Top Gear to me is something I can easily pop in at any time and just enjoy without having to think too hard about it. With Vietnam, I really got to be in a particular mindset in order to watch it. Just because it's not a bad special, but it's just one of those specials that requires you to be in a certain mood, I would say. You know that where like it's hard to like extrapolate, but hopefully I kind of get across what I'm talking about, where it's not necessarily that it's bad. You just gotta have to be in a particular mindset in order to watch it. And that's what Vietnam is to me. But anyways, first off is Hammond's Minx. I want to say his little 125cc Russian motorbike that they decided to spray paint just to piss him off. I'd say that Hammond honestly made a pretty solid choice, in all honesty. I mean, he just certainly had the most powerful motorcycle there of everyone. Certainly the most traditional motorcycle of everyone there. It's a tough little little beast. I don't know much about Minx motorcycles. I'm just I'm just starting to learn more about motorcycles. I've had kind of a keen interest in them, but through the past couple of years have I really gotten invested into them, mainly because I want to get my motorcycle license and ride motorcycles. Yes, I know it'll kill me. Shut up. I don't care. So that nope, 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 nope. I'd put it at I'll put it at B. Yeah, and then James May's Honda Cub. James made a good choice. Cubs have been manufactured forever. It is a Honda, so it is going to last forever and a day. Even an old Honda is still a Honda. He not exactly my favorite motorcycle from a styling perspective, but hey, he made a good choice, so I'll put it in B category. And Jeremy's Vespa, the only man who of the three who hates motorcycles with a passion, doesn't like them, doesn't understand them, even though he did say he would understand them. Um, and that fucking Vespa of his that always tipped over, his single cylinder Vespa that made maybe like what 2 horsepower at best, always toppled over and wobbled over. I mean, for a beginner, it makes sense to go with a Vespa, but even then, Jeremy definitely drew the short end of the stick. Okay, so next up is the Middle East, where they had to buy 3,000-pound convertibles and drive across the Middle East in them. This is before the Middle East had destabilized even worse than it did at the time, so yeah, that's fun. First up is Jeremy's Mazda MX-5. Um, Never been a huge MX-5 fan. Like, I'm sure that they're lovely, lovely cars. I'm sure that they handle very well. I'm sure that they're fantastic, but I've had so many Redditors and Jalopnik morons try and extrapolate and say that it's the best car ever and that it's the answer for everything, which even I can tell you it's not. And considering I can't even fit comfortably in a brand spanking new ND Miata, I doubt I could fit into any old Miata, any Miata, in all honesty. Like I'm 6'3", 6'4". There's no way I'm fitting in a Miata comfortably. There just isn't. I know some people say, "Oh, it's great for my tall friend." Your tall friend must be built differently than I am because I just can't fit in a Miata comfortably. Um, so I've never been a huge Miata fan. I get if people like them. I understand the appeal of it. You basically get a classic British roadster with none of the reliability and mechanical issues of a classic British roadster. But I just feel like they're highly overrated in my opinion. And Jeremy actually never didn't really buy a good example of it. Like the fact that that tiny little four-cylinder decided to turn into a three-cylinder. I want to say like the spark plug grounded itself out inside the cylinder. Something had to have happened to it at some point. I mean, it's the safe, sensible choice to buy a Mazda Miata. Um, and Jeremy did try to improve it by, by turning it by putting extra wheels on it. Never seen a six-wheel drive Miata in my entire lifetime, but there you go. Want to see a Miata with six wheels? You can see a Miata with six wheels. Thanks to one Jeremy Clarkson. Um, it's not the worst car that that there is. My personal feelings aside, Jeremy kind of did make a smart choice, but I'm not going to say it was the highlight of that episode either. So I'm going to put it at a solid B. Next up is Richard Hammond's little Fiat Barchetta. Um, I don't mind the Fiat Barchetta. The only thing I mind about it is that it's wrong wheel drive. Why people decide to make front wheel drive roadsters, I will never understand. But there is a style and a panache to it that's Italian and has style and panache to it. It also doesn't have nearly the same dependability because it's Italian, but hey. And the Barchetta actually is kind of charming, and I definitely do agree with the guys that it probably was the most charming car there. I think Hammond did make a good choice. In fact, it's weird that it basically was the only car that didn't go wrong under any circumstances. Yes, the Italian car somehow managed to be the most reliable. Process that for a second. So Hammond made a good choice. I'm putting it in A tier. It's not quite S tier for me. And finally, James's BMW Z3 Roadster. Oh boy. Um, Never been the biggest fan of the Z3 Roadster. It hasn't really aged well, in my opinion. Compared to the Z1, it's a much better, more improved take on the Roadster concept. But even still, I just find nothing to it outside of the Z3M uh, performance variant. I mean, this is a car that James Bond drove, and yet I remember nothing about it because it didn't do anything. Poor Pierce Brosnan. He, in his best film, his car basically gets no screen time, and in his worst film, he goes back to driving Astons, and they ruin it with that stupid active cloaking device. Oh, Brosnan just can't catch a break when it comes to Bond now, can he? But brief tangent aside, James did not buy a great car, in my opinion, especially considering he overpaid for it, and it's got GM's crappy 4L30E automatic transmission in it that, one, isn't reliable at all, and two, just it's a GM automatic. If you're looking for anything sporty out of a GM automatic, you got another thing coming for you. And with his anti-theft system and the electrical issues he had and all that, it just it was a bad decision. I did think it looked pretty cool with the Africa Core paint that he applied to it. But aside from that, yeah. Sorry, James. Okay. Next up is, I want to say, the India Special. I know a lot of people hate the India Special. I get where they're coming from. Again, I have to be in a mood for it. I think that a lot of the jokes don't necessarily hit and are very predictable. There's a lot of cringe comedy to it, which I'm not the biggest fan of at all. I don't necessarily like cringe comedy because I don't think it's funny and I can't extrapolate humor from it. But there's still some good things, and hey, bad or mediocre Top Gear is still better than 90% of the shit that gets released today. So there you go, in my opinion. Um, First up, let's talk about the first car that arrived, which was, where is it? There it is. James May's Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. Um, the Silver Shadow took a long time for me to grow on. Uh, I just didn't really care for it all that much as a car. I didn't like how it looked, and I've always been of the opinion that even though I really do like Rolls Royces now, you could probably get the same stuff that a Rolls Royce does in a big traditional American land yacht for less of the price, better mechanical reliability, and less expense on your wallet. Sure, the land yacht's not going to have nearly as nice of an interior to it, but you know, it's going to be less of a headache, and you'll still get a car that is smooth, quiet, comfortable. Maybe it doesn't make quite the same statement, but still makes a statement nevertheless. Um, and James kind of, was kind of stupid with it. I mean, I get the whole point is to show the best of Britain, and nothing says, fine British automobiles like a Rolls Royce, but when the transmission in your car, your GM Turbohydromatic 400, probably one of the best transmissions ever, is the most reliable thing about your car, it's kind of an issue, you know? Oh, let's source our suspension from Citroen. Can't see that going wrong now, can it? Even though not even Citroen mechanics like to deal with the hydropneumatic suspension of Citroens. I mean, that it delivers a comfortable ride. I'm certain of it, but goddamn, goddamn, does that just seem like a mechanical nightmare? And the fact that the suspension and the brakes share the same system, eh. So James made a really risky choice, in my opinion, but he actually kind of made the best choice out of all of them. There's nothing that really went wrong with that car. The things that he did to it, aside from ruining it with those big chunky off-road tires, weren't exactly awful design decisions. And that car, honestly, with the dark green paint job and the tan vinyl roof, actually did look pretty sharp for itself. So, in all honesty, I'd probably put it right. Ooh. Just because it's a roller, and I do like me a good roller, and he did buy a good roller. Next up is Jeremy's 96 Jaguar XJS with the 4-liter straight six, not the 6-liter V12, surprisingly enough. I don't know if his had a manual or not. I want to say his had a manual transmission. Did it have a manual transmission? I know the early XJSs had manuals. Someone can easily correct me if I'm wrong or confirm it if I'm right. Um, I mean, I kind of get Jeremy's logic. A Jag is a proper British automobile. I probably wouldn't have gone with an XJS though. Not that I hate the XJS. I personally think that an XJ, a standard XJ sedan, would have worked a lot better in my opinion. And I've also never been a big fan of the 91 to 96 XJSs. I feel like they lost a lot of interesting details. I think the front end doesn't look nearly as smooth as the pre-facelift versions. I hate the wraparound taillights compared to the standard corner taillights that it had. I hate there's a lot of design decisions that I just don't like about it. Um, and I mean, there wasn't much wrong that went mechanically with the with the old Jag, apart from the self-sabotage from everyone else. But it's kind of a ridiculous car, and the mods Jeremy made to it, while funny, are just ugh. So not exactly the best car that was there. Sorry. And then there's Hammond and his classic Mini, which never been a big classic Mini fan, mainly because I'm sure I could fit in a classic Mini. It's probably one of the only small cars I can think of where I can actually fit comfortably in a classic Mini. Not that I've driven it before. Heard nothing but good things about the classic Mini. And Hammond honestly did make a good choice. The fact that he bought a small zippy car in a highly congested area like India. And but between him painting the flag of Mexico on his hood, yeah, because that's what Hammond needed, and him ripping the front bumper off his car, trying to winch James up and towards the end of the special. Oh, that poor Mini saw so much abuse, but it's still. It was still a charming little car, in all honesty, so I'd probably put it in A tier. Yeah, I'd put it in A tier. Um, Next up is going to be I want to say it's Zimbabwe. Is it Zimbabwe? I know. Did they start in Zimbabwe or did they start in somewhere else? But basically, they had to buy secondhand estate cars for like £3,500 and find the source of the Nile River in them. And Jeremy had an E39 BMW 540i Touring, I want to say. The lost mechanical BMW with drive-by-wire that he had to sort out with a hammer. What else is electrical in here? Not the exhaust manifold. Um, I'll be honest, I've never been the biggest fan of the E39 5 Series. Compared to the E34 5 Series, which to me, honestly, is peak 5 Series, I've just never really cared for it. And yes, I know plenty of people say, ooh, the E39 M5 is the best. The only reason you think that is because it's got a V8, but BMW doesn't make good V8s for shit. So, yeah. And honestly, as a wagon, I think the E39 looks even more awkward than it does as a sedan. Um, I will say that Jeremy didn't make the worst choice he could have. The E39 is still mechanically reliable and dependable, which is not what you can say about a lot of BMWs after it, especially the E65 series that succeeded it, but we'll get to that in another time. Uh, I do think there are still some good moments that Jeremy had with that stupid Beamer. like his handbrake. But other than that, it was kind of a. I mean, it made it, but it's still not exactly what I. It was still kind of a meh car, so I'd put it right about there. Next up is Hammond's Subaru WRX, not an STI. Um, Hammond kind of made the predictable choice, the fact that it's a Subaru, which, okay, it's not the uh, byword for dependability that some people want to extrapolate on, but he a did have at least a fun car to drive around in, and it's a classic bug-eyed WRX as well. So one of the generations of WRX that can actually hold its credentials with all the vape bros. His car had pretty much nothing go wrong with it mechanically wise, even though those roads pretty much tore all of them up towards the end. His car was no exception. the the toilet seat replacing his hood scoop, the chair that he had that ended up going into the river. And the fact that he did buy an all-wheel drive wagon was actually a pretty smart move in the conditions of it. So again, not a big WRX fan, but Hammond made a solid choice. So I actually I'd put it in A. I'd put it in A tier. He made a pretty good choice, in all honesty. And then there's May with the Volvo 850R. Um, okay, buying a Volvo estate wagon is the boring, safe, predictable choice. I would not pick an 850R though. I mean, yes, the 850R is kind of fun in its own ridiculous way. You know, a big bruiser station wagon that has a turbocharged 5-cylinder engine that can accelerate and handle really well for itself and actually manage to be a good performance leaper in its own right. But I would not pick a hardcore boy racer kind of version of an estate car to take to a country with absolutely no roads. The ride is just so punishing in those cars. And I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the 850 series of Volvos. You know, I like Volvos enough, but in all honesty, if I'm gonna go traditional boxy Volvo, I'm probably gonna go standard 200, 700, 900 rear wheel rear wheel drive old school Volvos like that. Just because, yeah, they are completely unkillable, but also because they're comfortable, they're pretty easy to fix. You know, okay, they don't make as much power as the 850R, but they're a lot more livable within the 850R, especially on a rough terrain, and it's rear wheel drive, not wrong wheel drive like the 850R, but still. Um, and that poor thing just suffered so much abuse. The fact that he shattered two wheels on it, not one wheel, two wheels. Busted the shock absorbers up, you know, Jeremy taking that giant chunk out of his hood to fix his door. Cockson! And him ranting about it afterward. Uh, I mean, James had the right idea of picking a Volvo for an estate car. He just did not have the right idea of picking an 850R. But there was still a lot of fun, memorable stuff to this big battle wagon. So yeah, I'd put it in A tier. Okay, next up is I want to say it's Burma. Yeah, where they tried to build a source. They actually tried to build an actual bridge over River Kwai. Full disclosure, Burma's not my favorite special at all. I just find it kind of boring, in all honesty. I mean, there's two funny bits to Burma to me. One is the beginning when 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 Jeremy shows when they're all showing their cars off. And I also really do like when they go to the Burma War Memorial and Jeremy's reciting passages out of Bridge from the River Kwai to his compatriots to kind of give the tone and the somberness necessary to remind them what they're trying to do. So there's that. All these trucks to me, I have no interest in lorries at all. They don't interest me in the slightest. There's not a lot of huge memorability to them in my opinion. They're just kind of there. Yeah, they're just there. Next up, Patagonia, where they pick V8 cars to celebrate the V8. Yes, this is the one where Argentina got all butthurt and SJW-ish about, you know, Jeremy's license plate on his car somehow being a reference to the Falkland Wars, even though that wasn't the case, and they all got ran out. And yeah, pretty ugly. You guys want to make fun of America for what happened in Alabama? Trust me, Argentina did it way worse than we ever could. But regardless, it's still a fun special. Definitely like the first half more than the second half. And let's start off with the cars. Let's start off with Jeremy's Porsche 928, which is pretty much the only Porsche I honestly really like. Um, I'm not a big fan of Porsches in general. The 928 is like the one exception to that, which is weird because again, it took a long time for me to warm up to the 928 at all. I just thought it looked kind of ugly, but now I realize, nah, it's actually a very good looking car. It's aged well for itself. It's okay. It's a mechanical nightmare to keep running with a whole lot of electrical issues with it, but I honestly still really I honestly did think that Jeremy didn't make that bad of a choice. And honestly, the one thing that keeps the Porsche 928 in the higher tiers for me is the story he taught about. He is the story. Like, if you haven't listened to the story, go watch it on YouTube. But when he talks about what the 928 means to him with regards to him being able to see his dad for the last time, that's like that's my favorite Jeremy Clarkson moment of all time because him being offensive and shocking and kind of funny and taking the piss out of everything. That's what people love about Clarkson. But I think that's my favorite moment because that really does prove one, Clarkson's philosophy of what it means to be a car enthusiast and what cars can mean to you, and two, it does show a very very human side of him that you don't get to see often, and the emotional resonance it has, I'm sure with a lot of people, is second to none. In all honesty, it's still the high point of Jez's career as far as I'm concerned. Is that story of the 928? So yeah, just for that alone, I'm probably gonna put it. No, I'm gonna put it in S tier because it deserves it. Um, next up, Richard's 1971 Mustang Mach 1. Oh, this is painful. I'm not a Mustang guy by any means, but the 71 Mustangs are my absolute favorite Mustangs of all time, especially the Mach 1s. They're just such cool cars. I know that this was the point where the Mustang got really fat for itself, which ironic considering how much current Mustangs weigh now, that somehow the 71s were considered fat back in the day, but regardless. And I mean, it does suit Richard. It does make sense. Ford kind of helped democratize the V8, as it were, for the common masses. Ford's got a long history of V8s. The Mustang is kind of the V8 powered car that Ford still has. Why not pick a Ford Mustang? Why not pick a classic Ford Mustang? But man, was his example such a hunk of shit. Oh, so many problems with that Mustang, so many issues with it. And I'll be honest, I personally wouldn't pick something that old to go across, South America in. Just not because I didn't think it could do it, but like we saw with Richard, you just don't know if it's been taken care of, driven properly, or what have you. And something that old, I mean, okay, you could fix it with a basic set of Harbor Freight tools. Whoop-de shit. But the amount of times you may or may not be fixing it, that's just too big of a gamble. And he picked a bad example of it. So the only reason it's in B tier is just because I really love the 71 Mustangs, but yeah, Rich didn't pick the best one. And then James May and his Lotus Esprit. Um, I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the final Lotus Esprits from like 93 to 2004. I don't think they look all that nice, to be honest. And if I were choosing a V8, a car with V8 power, I definitely would not be picking a Lotus, especially a Lotus with a V8 made by Lotus. There's a reason that if you're smart, you outsource your V8. That if you're smart and you've never built an engine like that before, just saying, just saying. But surprisingly enough, the fact that low slung mid engine, you know, vanity mobile built by a bunch of numpties in a shed in Norfolk somehow managed to be the most reliable car there and actually managed to get through all that stuff is nothing short of incredible. So it's kind of like the opposite. James actually bought a good example of it for a car that I didn't like, whereas which is the exact opposite of Richard. So I gotta give actually no. Just for the fact that it managed to actually be more reliable, I'm putting the Lotus up in A tier. All right, and that was it for um uh, the old Top Gear stuff. After that, Jeremy had his fracas, he got fired, and they moved over to the Grand Tour with Amazon. Um, Grand Tour took a long time to find its footing, in my opinion. Um, I still think it doesn't quite compare to old school Top Gear, but I still like it regardless. Um, First real special that they ever did was their when they picked cars to try and drive to Africa to save the world, try and democratize everything when it came to like fish and stuff. Um, First up is James's Mercedes Benz estate. Once again, another W123 Benz. Like I said, with the W123, it's a safe choice, especially in Africa. You know, the estate version, it's a classic Mercedes estate. There's a lot of space in there. Um, he did not make the proper modifications for it, from the fact that he turned the entire um, back part of it into a fish tank that didn't really work well, the fact that his engine flooded constantly. And yeah, why not make an already heavy car even heavier? No wonder they ended up cutting the front end of it and just towing the back half of it. So, sorry, James. Didn't exactly make the best choice. Did give us a lot of comedy, though. But, yeah, not not exactly one of the better cars of the Grand Tour. Next up is Richard's, little motorcycle. I forget what it's called. But it's like a cheap little motorcycle that he tries to like sun dry fish on, which first of all, I would not be carrying food on a motorcycle. I know that there are plenty of people who do carry food on motorcycles. Um Not something like fish though, especially not fish from the sea. That's a recipe for disaster. Um what else? And he kept falling off the damn thing because that bike clearly was not designed for off-roading in mind. Um, not the extreme off-roading that they did. And I'll be honest with Jeremy, there's only so many times you can watch Hammond fall off a motorbike before it gets a bit boring. So, didn't make a good choice. Sorry, Richard. And then finally is Jeremy's Nissan truck, which he did make a good choice. Big diesel truck. It is a Nissan truck. I mean, it's going to be reliable. It's not going to be the most comfortable truck in the world, but hey, it could be worse. But him routing his diesel exhaust for diesel smoked fish. Oh God. Oh gee. Jesus. But out of all these options, Jeremy did make the best choice here, even if it is just an pickup trucks. So yeah, B tier. Next up is going to be Bolivia when they had to buy off-road vehicles and take nature photos. First up is Jeremy's Jeep Wrangler, which I'm probably gonna put. Yeah, I'm gonna put it S tier. Honestly, Jeremy made a really smart decision buying an old TJ Wrangler for his choice. I mean, nothing went wrong on that thing at all, other than it getting backed up by Hammond. You know, I have my issues with the Jeep Wrangler as a vehicle, just mostly with the JK stuff. I've never driven like a TJ or older Wrangler, but you know, Jeremy made the absolute best choice for this. He picked a legitimate off-road vehicle that he didn't have to modify extensively, that worked well in all the conditions, that was reliable, and it was certainly memorable. All the gay jokes about the Jeep. And especially when they fuck with his radio so that he blasts it's raining men while he drives. Ah, fantastic stuff. Absolutely love it. Um, Next up is I want to say, yeah, James May's Fiat Panda 4x4, which I don't understand what he was trying to do. Again, it's like the little, at least with the Suzuki thing, it's a genuine off-roader, so I can kind of understand it. But Fiat Panda with four-wheel drive does not a tough off-roader make. It's just that's just taking like a small off-road thing to parsimoniously ridiculous degrees. And honestly, I just don't think it was that memorable of a vehicle in all honesty. So, and then Hammond's GMT 400 CK 2500 truck. Oh Christ, on a bike. I honestly really like the GMT 400 Chevy trucks. They're probably some of my favorite Chevy truck generations ever. If I could have another pickup truck again, I'd probably pick an old GMT 400. Um, I know the interior is made out of plastic. I know the entire truck is probably going to fall apart at the seam, but it'll keep going. And they've honestly have aged well as far as the design goes, and they're reliable. There's just enough modernity to make them drivable day to day, but not enough to make them expensive to maintain. Just that perfect thing. But Christ on a bike, Richard's fucking pickup truck. Just it that that remember what I was saying about the Range Rover and going to and sometimes bigger is not better? That 2500 truck is the absolute epitome of it because it's like every single Bubba thing in the face of the planet. Hell, just put a lift kit and some big ass chunk of tires on it, boy, and it'll do fine stinging in the mud, man. And Richard proved that's not the case at all with that GMT 400 truck at all. It was a big, monstrous, heavy piece of garbage that was way too big and cumbersome. You could slap a lift kit and off-road tires on anything. Should you take it off-road for it? No. Do I appreciate the fact that unlike a lot of the pavement princesses I see, that it actually does get driven on road? Yes. Or off-road? Yes. But it was still a ridiculous thing. I guess it did describe Hammond's vanity in a nutshell, in all honesty, but you know, still really bad. Still really bad. And it sucks because like I said, I love the GMT 400 trucks, but mate, you didn't do well. And now we go from the studio format to just them doing individual stuff. Seaman. Not the biggest fan of Seaman at all. Just don't really care for it as a special. Not a whole lot of jokes. Boats are boring to me. Um, Jeremy's PBR gets seats here just because it's a PBR, even though he really could have made a better choice. But the other two boats, yeah, they don't interest me at all, and they're boring. I don't like boats at all. Next up is a massive hunt. Probably the worst thing that the guys have ever done. I really don't like that special at all. I've only watched it once, had no desire to watch it again. Um, Jeremy's off-road Bentley Continental GT is honestly the highlight for me, just because he managed to make a Bentley Continental GT into an off-road vehicle, and it managed to be usable. And the fact that he continued to use it until Bentley basically told him, "You gotta stop." But we'll put it in a museum. You know, that's kind of cool. But the Caterham and the Focus, ugh, just both terrible choices. The Caterham's probably the worst of the two. At least the Focus RS could have been something good if he didn't put it on Caterpillar tracks, but that Caterham was never going to be a good vehicle for that challenge. Next up is the lockdown special made during when the world decided to get even more worse than it already has. where they decide to buy big American 70s land yachts and drive across Scotland in them. First up is Jeremy's Lincoln Continental Mark V. I honestly do love this thing a lot. The Mark, the Mark V is my favorite Lincoln of all time. In fact, this is heretical. I actually prefer to the suicide door Continentals from the 60s. Feel free to burn me at the stake if you need to. Yes, I know it does have its problems. It's a 70s car with all the 70s build quality. You know, the most power it ever made was 210 horsepower out of a 7.5 liter V8. Things about the size of a city block, and it handles about as well as a waterbed full of lukewarm pudding. But it's got style, it's got low end torque, it's supremely comfortable and quiet. I've driven a couple of these. I always wanted one of these things, and driving them just further solidified that for me. And honestly, Jeremy made a pretty good choice in my opinion. I kind of wish his had the 460 in it just so he could get a little bit more power out of it. Not the 400. Not that the 400's awful, but you can tell the difference between the 460 and the 400. That like 40 horsepower difference between the two it's pretty noticeable, in all honesty, for a car that size. I know these make tons of low end torque, and 20 pound-feet of low end and 20-pound difference between them isn't the worst thing in the world, but yeah, that 460 could have been good. And honestly, I didn't like Jeremy's modifications to it at all. The big chunky donk wheels just made it look really trashy. And even though it is very period appropriate, not a big fan of the baby blue. I mean, that's the kind of thing you only own if you've got a leisure suit in that exact same color. You know, you know what I mean? Just not exactly the greatest color for it at all. But I still really enjoy these Lincoln Continentals, and yeah, A tier, sue me. I am an old man with a predilection for the disco era. What can I say? Next up is Hammond's Boat Tail Buick Riviera, which they all kind of like surprised that it didn't sell well at a time, and it actually didn't sell well. I know a lot of people actually think that the Buick Riviera was a great seller. It actually wasn't. It did not sell all that highly throughout its entire life. The reason for that being is that Buick was a very conservative brand that was made very understated cars, and the Boattail Riviera was kind of a bit too radical for the customer clientele that they were, you know, experiencing. Like, Buicks were cars for doctors and lawyers and very upper crust kind of professional sort of, businesses where you have to show that you don't have money, but you don't scream it at the top of your lungs, look how much I make. You know, unless you're the kind of lawyer that's like Saul Goodman or something, you don't drive around in a 71 Boattail Riviera. And you didn't back then if you were traditional Buick clientele. But, a lot of people love the Boattail Rivieras now. I like them personally. I still think that the first gen Riviera is always going to be the best, but I think that the Boattail Riviera is a fairly close second. Um, and Hammond did honestly make not too bad of a choice, in all honesty. Even though that stupid Plymouth Superbird wing and the massive supercharger he put on it just made it worse. Yeah, let's have you be 5'7", Hammond, with a car with very little visibility already, and let's just make it worse by fitting a massive supercharger straight in the middle of it. Can't see that going wrong. But at the end of the day, it's still a very good car, so I'd probably, yeah, it's going at A tier. And then James's 76 Coupe de Ville. I like Cadillacs a lot. I fucking can't stand the 71 to 76 Cadillacs at all. I know so many people say the exact goddamn thing. It was the last of the truly big Cadillacs before they all downsized. whatever. I don't care at all. You know, they've never looked right to me. They're just big cars for the sake of being big cars, and they don't look at all graceful or elegant compared to either the 65 to 70 Cadillacs that came before it or the 77 to 84 Cadillacs that came after it. Like, I know a lot of people don't like the downsized Cadillacs, but if you actually look at them from a design perspective, the downsized Cadillacs, especially from like 77 to 79, are a lot better proportioned, a lot better detailed than the big bloated massive 71 to 76 Cadillacs at all. And they were better built. And they had much better interiors that didn't look cheaply applied. And even though they no longer had my big 500 cubic inch 8.2-liter V8 motor, you know, that 425 was probably more potent than the old 500 was, and it went a lot better with the smaller, lighter cars that they were built in. I mean, you could take your 500 cubic inch V8 and all 190 horsepower and stick it up your ass sideways for all I care. I mean, I get why James chose it. One, because he wants to do the whole, oh, I'm James May and I prefer Cadillacs, and I think Cadillacs are very good cars, sort of joke. And the fact that unlike the other two, which are personal luxury coupes, the Eldorado is front wheel drive. Surprisingly enough, bet you didn't know that. Yes, the 71 and 78 Eldorados are front wheel drive, whereas these Cadillacs are rear wheel drive. But I mean, you know, the fact that the Mark V and the Riviera were designed first to be two-door cars, specifically two-door cars, and the Coupe de Ville is just a two-door car with just a two-door car version of a four-door car platform. And the modifications James made to it weren't that good. That stupid low exhaust, lowering the suspension on it, and the fact that Jeremy and Richard decided to put fucking Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to replace the fender skirt he lost. Which, if you ever, I can't speak for James, but I will say anyone who decides to pull a stunt like that, especially with regards to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, I am going to disown you and I am going to kill you in that particular order. You know, just no. But yeah, never really did like the cat this generation of Cadillac beforehand. It's probably one of my least favorite Cadillacs of all time, and James May did not make it any better. So yeah, sorry to anyone who likes this car, but I'm right, you're wrong. So suck it, bitch. I kid, of course, I kid. And then finally is Canage à Trois, which I don't know why you'd put the Canage à Trois cars on there because all these cars are not. I mean, they drove them around certainly, but they weren't the main focus of the special at all. First up is Jeremy's Citroen CX, BX. I want to say one of the big Citroens. Um, I don't mind it. I mean, I honestly do kind of like the big Citroens a lot, just because they're my kind of cars. You know, all they're all they're concerned about is just being comfortable and quiet and smooth. Um, this style of Citroen's not exactly my favorite from a styling perspective, especially not as a wagon. I think it looks a bit awkward. Kind of looks like a combination between a station wagon and a hearse. In all honesty, um, but I can't deny that Jeremy didn't make a halfway decent choice. So I'll just put in C tier. The Matra Murina, I want to say that Hammer did. Yeah. And then the Renault Aventime from James. Also kind of not much more I could say about that. And even though there have been two specials that have been released. If you want my opinions on those two specials with regards to Scanny Flick, um, Jeremy's Audi RS4 would be in B tier. Hammond's WRX would be in A tier, and James's Evo 8, I want to say, would be in S tier, just because that thing was a fucking survivor. And as for the that road trip one that they did with the weird cars, all of them would be in D tier, just because they're all horrible. But yeah, that is it for this list. Yeah. Um. So real quick, with regards to the future of this channel, as it were, 2024 is coming up. In fact, for some of you, 2024 may already have come up. In fact, by the time this video goes up, it might already be 2024 for you guys. So I guess with another year passed, there's the question of, well, Pred, what are you going to do? Well, truth be told, 2024 may not be the best year for this channel. It's long story short, I can no longer afford to live in California. My dad and his wife are moving back to Ohio. I'm not going back to Ohio with them for very personal reasons. Instead, I'm moving to Idaho because, well, it's cheap cost of living, very, very, very lax gun laws. You know, just it seems like the proper kind of environment for me to live in. You know, I am. It should not surprise you. I'm kind of a conservative kind of guy, so yeah, I do want to live in a more conservative state, as it were. One for financial reasons, because California is just too goddamn expensive to live in, and also just for reasons of less red tape, as it were. So I am going to be moving to Idaho. As far as the living situation is concerned, I don't know what the future is going to hold. I'm probably going to live in an apartment complex, which means that I probably am going to continue to focus on work. So there may not be enough times for me to actually be able to record, make let's plays, make videos, make stuff like this. I'm not saying never say never, because there always could be that possibility that I could have some downtime or whatever to be able to do it. But at the same time, you know, just considering that moving is a big freaking deal, and you know, getting set up and set down and settled and everything, it's not exactly conducive to running a YouTube hobby, as it were, because it's not a career for me, it's just a hobby. But before I move, I at least have Resident Evil 8 downloaded. I managed to finally buy it from the winter sale on PSN, so I do have that downloaded and ready to go at any point in time, and I am going to finally let's play the goddamn game at some point in time. Never had the opportunity to, finally get the chance to. Hopefully it turns out good. Hopefully it turns out better than Resident Evil 4 Remake. No, I will not let the fact that I don't like the Resident Evil 4 Remake, and I will always remind you I don't like the Resident Evil 4 Remake. You're just going to have to live with it. So that's the only true future project I have for the channel, is just Resident Evil 8. One thing I am kind of toying with is, if you ever watch Mike Fire Burn or Zach Hazard, and you watch the Zach's Gun Rant videos and, you know, his autistic hyperfixation on guns, I love those videos a lot. But I kind of want to do something similar with cars. I've got the Crew Motorfest downloaded. I think there are other games with cars in them that I could easily discuss or talk about that maybe aren't in Crew Motorfest that I could go over. And kind of do the same thing. Just kind of like rant about these things. Kind of get into the technical specs. It is going to be a lot more polished. You know, it's not going to be continuous. These are actually going to be clips cobbled together and edited somewhat decently, even if basically, like a proper video is. Because I'm a real YouTuber now. But that's one idea that's going through my head at this point in time. If, I mean, if you, let me know what you guys think about that. Do you like this idea? Do you not like this idea? Do you think that it's a bit boring? Because, there's plenty of car channels out there, and I'll be honest, the cars are my real passion. I love to talk about cars and all that sort of stuff, but, doing that hard 180 from Let's Plays and live streams and tier lists to just talking about cars is going to be a bit tough. Hopefully, this is a good stepping stone, I would say, but you never know how it goes. But let me know what you guys think. So that's basically kind of the state of the channel moving forward. There's nothing I can do about it. All I can do about it is just hope that I do get to a point where I can do this a bit more frequently. A bit, not a whole lot, but just a bit. I'm not looking to use this as like a retirement plan or like propel myself to fame or whatever. But just I do it for fun. But at the same time, just because you could do it for fun, you got to be able to balance work and play, and work's more important to me. So yeah. But enough about my rambling. That's kind of the state of how 2024 is going to look. But with regards to 2024, I hope you guys have a good new year. And thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate that. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. Surprisingly enough, my tier lists actually get the most positive responses of a lot of the videos that I do, which is weird. But until next time, guys, take care. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you whenever I can. And hopefully it's sooner rather than later, but let's see how 2024 goes. Bye.